Tonight we step onto a wooden deck slick with seawater, the wind lashing salt across your face, and the boards beneath your boots moaning like a tired old hound. The longship beneath you is narrow, fast, and made for these northern seas, and here you are, clutching the rail while the waves slap your thighs. The storm clouds gather overhead like a bad mood, and yet the men around you grin as though thunder itself is a drinking song. You probably won't survive this, but at least your beard will look fantastic when history writes you down. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your longship cuts through icy water, sails stretched taut like a wolf's back, while the mast creaks in rhythm with your heartbeat. You grip your beard, fingers finding tangles crusted with salt. It's a mess. You can't charge into a raid with seaweed in your whiskers. That would be embarrassing, even more so than falling into the fjord after one too many meads. The Vikings understood that appearance mattered. Archaeologists have found bone and antler combs in burial sites all across Scandinavia, proof that these weren't just tools of vanity but essentials carried even to the grave. You shift on the planks, watching your fellow warriors. One sharpens his axe, another hums a tune that probably hasn't been in style since Odin had both eyes. But most, yes, most are tugging at their beards. Pulling, twisting, smoothing. The grooming starts early, even before the ship hits land, because raids aren't just about gold and cattle. They're about reputation. Looking fearsome, organized, and yes, clean, sent a message that carried farther than the smoke of a burning village. The sea spray stings your eyes, and you remember that last night by the hearth, when an elder told you of Odin himself, whose beard was said to gleam with wisdom. A scruffy warrior might be brave, but a warrior who kept his hair in order was seen as favored by the gods. Historians still argue whether this was more superstition or practicality, but you can feel the weight of tradition in every stroke of the comb. You dig into your pouch, fingers closing on your own grooming kit, a small antler comb, carved with crude lines that double as decoration and lucky charms. Its teeth are worn, smoothed by years of pulling through bristles. You imagine how many men before you sat under these same stars, breathing this same icy wind, dragging bone teeth through stubborn tangles while lightning flickered over the horizon. And it isn't just about neatness. A neat beard one you respect. Chroniclers in England, men who clutched pens instead of spears, wrote about the shocking cleanliness of Vikings. Compared to their own unwashed lords, the Northerners seemed almost vain. Once a week, said one cleric, they bathed and groomed, which might not sound like much now but was revolutionary then. Imagine how scandalized your enemies must have felt, facing raiders who looked better conditioned than the monks who wrote the complaints. You run the comb through your beard again, wincing at the snags. The tangles snap like small twigs, and you think about how strange it is that your face, this rough and hairy mask, is part of your armor. Not steel, not leather, but strands of hair shaped to intimidate. The sea growls beneath you. A gull screeches overhead, mocking, and you swear it sounds like it's laughing at your grooming session. That's your first joke of the evening. The bird thinks you're ridiculous, but what does it know? It eats garbage and screams all day. The combing grows rhythmic, hypnotic. You forget for a moment that you're on a warship, that your hands will soon grip an axe, not a comb. Instead, the strokes remind you of home, of a mother who once braided your hair, of the smell of peat smoke in a longhouse, of laughter spilling into the night. Funny how a beard comb can drag up more than just knots. One of your shipmates leans over, grinning through his own bristles. Careful, or the thralls will fall in love with you before we even light the torches. Laughter rolls across the deck, another small joke, the kind that keeps fear from biting too deep. You chuckle too, though you keep combing, because you know this ritual isn't vanity, it's power. You want to look like someone who has their life together, even if tomorrow you'll be dodging arrows. Lightning forks across the sky, and for a heartbeat, the world is nothing but light and shadow. The polished teeth of your comb gleam. In that flash, you see how serious the others look, each man bent over his beard as though over a sacred text. Some braid, some twist, some smooth. It's strange to think of a fleet of raiders primping before destruction, but here you are, part of it. Your mind drifts to rumors you've heard, that some warriors rubbed goose fat or fish oil into their whiskers, making them shine, keeping them soft. Quirky, maybe even smelly, but effective. You haven't tried it yet, though your nose tells you half the men here have. You can practically smell the North Sea itself in their beards. The waves settle slightly, longship sliding into calmer water. Ahead, faint lights flicker, shoreline torches, perhaps, or the glow of a village unaware of what sails toward it. You feel the weight of the axe at your belt, but right now, it's the weight of your beard that grounds you. The tug of the comb, the scrape on your skin, the small comfort of ritual. And as you drag the comb one last time through a stubborn knot, you realize this, of all the preparations for war, it's the simplest ones that make you feel human. Not the sharpening of weapons, not the shouting of chants, but the slow, careful grooming of hair. In this tiny act, you hold back chaos for just a little longer. The mast groans, the sail bellies, and the prow points toward destiny. Your beard is ready, and so, reluctantly, are you. The ship finally noses into calmer waters, and the oars dip like long, tired arms pulling you toward the dark curve of a coast. The worst of the storm has passed, leaving a sky thick with clouds and a moon that peeks through only now and then like a shy child. You step onto damp sand, boots sinking, and the others fan out, their torches kept low. But before anyone even thinks about axes, before the talk of loot and smoke, there's another ritual, the fire. And you already know what comes with the fire: combs, laughter, and a strange sort of calm. The warriors pile driftwood, sparks crackle, and soon the glow spreads across their faces. Shadows leap on rough cheeks and eyes glint with that half-mad gleam of raiders, yet their hands reach for combs. It would be comical if it weren't so normal. You sit cross-legged in the sand, tugging out your own small tool, bone smoothed by years of use. The warmth of the flames brushes your skin, and you hear the scrape, scrape, scrape of others working beside you. If there's such a thing as Viking ASMR, this is it. You run the teeth of your comb through your beard, each tug loosening knots the sea left behind. Salt flakes drop like tiny snow, and you flick them into the fire where they hiss. Around you, men joke, some singing lines from sagas that sound like someone tried to rhyme after too much mead. One younger warrior, whose beard barely passes for stubble, gets teased relentlessly. "Careful, don't lose that mighty forest," someone chuckles, and the lad rolls his eyes while combing what looks like 3 hairs. You smile, because humor is armor too. And here's your historical fact of the night: Norse combs weren't crude objects. Archaeologists have found them finely carved, sometimes with patterns that suggest both pride and artistry. They weren't disposable either. Men and women alike valued them enough to be buried with them. Imagine that you die, and the one thing you want in the afterlife is your beard comb. Priorities. But you've heard stranger tidbits whispered on nights like this. Some say warriors used lice combs as well, those with finer teeth designed to drag out pests. It sounds disgusting, but lice were a fact of life. You picture a row of fierce raiders, picking at their beards for bugs, and you can't help but smirk. Even the fiercest wolf has fleas. Still, firelight combing wasn't just hygiene, it was ritual. You notice how the act slows everyone down. Even the loudest braggarts grow quiet after a few strokes. The fire pops, the surf hisses, and the world shrinks to this circle of light. Maybe grooming together reminded men of home, of mothers or wives who once cared for their hair. Maybe it bound them, like a chant or a feast. Historians still argue whether these nightly combing rituals had a spiritual dimension or were simply practical habits. Either way, the effect is undeniable. You feel steadier with every pass. You tilt your head, catching your reflection in a small puddle beside the fire. The water ripples with each shift of sand, but it's enough to see your face framed by flames. The beard looks better already, straighter, fuller. It's funny, here you are, about to raid some poor village, and you're worried about presentation. It's the ultimate job interview. First impressions matter, even when you're carrying a sword. The smell of burning wood mixes with the faint tang of fish oil. Someone has brought out a pot of greasy balm and is slicking his whiskers, rubbing the mixture between his palms before dragging it down in long strokes. The scent is thick, both unpleasant and comforting, like old leather boots you can't throw away. A comrade passes the pot your way, raising his brows. You take a little, because why not? If you're going to charge into battle, you might as well shine. You laugh softly at the absurdity. Picture it. Yes, we pillaged your monastery, but did you see how glossy our beards were? Joke number 2, tucked into the firelight, and yet it rings true. There's pride in it. Even enemies noticed. Records from Anglo-Saxon lands talk about the fine hair and combed beards of these raiders, details too consistent to be exaggeration. It startled locals who were more accustomed to men who didn't bother with daily grooming. Imagine their surprise when their doom arrived looking freshly styled. The group quiets again as combs keep working. The scrape of bone on hair grows like a chorus, steady and slow. You close your eyes for a moment and listen, feeling your shoulders drop. The rhythm calms you, like brushing away not just tangles but the day's weariness. You can almost forget the violence ahead. Almost. Someone breaks the silence with a boast. He claims that a properly combed beard makes you invisible to bad luck. The others laugh, but nobody dismisses it outright. Superstition seeps into everything. Maybe there's truth in it, maybe not, but you don't skip your strokes. You've seen what happens to men who tempt fate, and you'd rather not be the example. The fire burns lower, embers glowing like tiny eyes in the dark. You set your comb aside, running fingers through softened strands, satisfied. Around you, the others do the same, some braiding, some twisting ends into knots. One man even tugs out a small metal trinket and slides it into place at the end of his beard. The charm catches the firelight, tiny but bright, and you wonder what meaning it carries. Protection, luck, or maybe just fashion. The night stretches, heavy with smoke and salt air. You lie back on the sand, beard neatly combed, watching sparks rise into the wind. Above, the clouds finally break, revealing a patch of stars. They look ancient, indifferent, watching you with the same calm they've offered for 1,000 years. You know tomorrow will bring noise and fire and blood, but tonight it's just men, combs, and the quiet crackle of a fire. One last thought crosses your mind before sleep. It's odd how much humanity lingers in these small rituals. Even raiders stop to smooth their hair, as if to remind themselves they're more than the chaos they unleash. And with that, you close your eyes, beard tidy, heart steadier, drifting into uneasy dreams. The night gives way to a damp grey morning. You wake with sand in your ears, dew on your cloak, and despite the combing by the fire, a beard that already feels like a nest of kelp washed ashore. Salt air does that. You push yourself upright, brushing off grit, and your hand automatically checks your pouch for the comb. Still there. Still solid. It's funny how that little piece of carved bone feels as important as the axe on your belt. You sit up fully and look around. Other warriors are doing the same thing, stretching, yawning, scratching. And right after scratching, combing. Again. The scrape begins, filling the cool morning like a strange kind of birdsong. You take yours out too, the carved antler smoothed by time, its teeth slightly stained from use. It feels cool in your hand, heavier than it looks. This is where you realize something. Viking combs weren't cheap afterthoughts. Archaeologists digging in places like York have found combs crafted from antler, bone, even walrus ivory. Some are decorated with intricate lines, little geometric patterns that must have taken hours to carve. They weren't disposable plastic rectangles like you might toss in a drawer today. They were personal treasures, repaired if broken, carried everywhere. Some had cases, sliding sheaths to protect the teeth, almost like sunglasses cases for the beard-obsessed. You drag yours through your beard, feeling it pull, and you can almost imagine the craftsman who made it. Someone hunched over a workbench in a smoky longhouse, carving each tooth with care, maybe muttering a charm as he worked. You're not just combing your beard, you're holding a fragment of someone else's patience. And here's a quirky tidbit. The teeth of these combs weren't uniform. One side often had wider teeth for general grooming, the other finer teeth for removing lice. Yes, lice again. You sigh. It's not glamorous, but it's reality. Imagine a warrior, fierce and terrifying, pausing mid-raid to scratch furiously. Doesn't quite fit the legend. That's why combs mattered so much. They weren't vanity, they were survival against the itch. Still, historians debate whether all the intricate decoration was purely aesthetic or if it carried meaning. Was a spiral pattern just pretty, or was it meant to invoke protection, strength, or fertility? Historians still argue whether these patterns were coded messages or just bored artistry. You look at your own plain tool and wonder what yours says about you, probably cheap. The camp is stirring now. A kettle clinks, someone is already gnawing on dried fish, and over it all rises the steady rhythm of combing. You notice how each man holds his tool differently, some with reverence, some absent-mindedly, some like they're in a contest with their own hair. One guy even holds up his comb to the light, inspecting it as if the fire's soot from last night dulled its shine. You chuckle. Imagine treating a comb like a holy relic. But then again, you treat yours like that too. The sea glints nearby, and you catch yourself studying its surface. Salt crusts on your beard again already, and you mutter under your breath. Why did you even bother last night? You grin at your own complaint. Joke number 1 today: beards, like taxes, always come back whether you want them to or not. You shift closer to the fire pit's ashes, still warm, and notice a pile of discarded hair clumps scattered like little mouse nests. Men really went at their beards last night. There's something both gross and oddly touching about it, like evidence of shared humanity. One warrior nudges you with his boot, grinning. Comb enough and maybe Odin himself will braid it for you. You roll your eyes, but you keep combing anyway. You know these comments are half joke, half belief. People thought hair carried power, that it was tied to strength and spirit. Just look at Samson's story from faraway lands. Maybe Vikings had their own version. Shave your beard, and suddenly you're not a warrior, just a boy playing soldier. The comb scrapes again, and you fall into rhythm. Each pass untangles more than just hair. It untangles nerves, jitters, the gnawing thought that soon you'll run at screaming strangers. This ritual, this tiny tool, gives you control in a world where tomorrow isn't promised. You glance at another man's comb. His has tiny bronze rivets, polished bright. It must have belonged to someone of status, or maybe he looted it. Either way, it gleams like jewelry. That's another fact. Some combs were expensive, imported, traded across long distances. Ivory from Greenland, for example, worked into sleek tools that only the wealthy could afford. Your plain antler suddenly feels a bit humble, like driving a rusty cart next to someone's polished stallion. Yet, pride seeps in all the same. You tug again, the comb clicking through knots, and feel your beard settle into a respectable shape. The morning air carries the smell of smoke, fish, and damp leather, but beneath it you catch something faint and herbal scent. Someone's tucked a sprig of thyme or juniper into their pouch, crushing it into their beard as they comb. Vikings didn't have minty shampoo, but they improvised. You make a mental note. You might borrow a sprig later, if only to mask the smell of goose fat your neighbor is using. By now, the camp is buzzing. Axes are checked, shields stacked, and yet the combing hasn't stopped. It's as essential as sharpening steel. You realize that in a way, the comb is a weapon too, not for slicing, but for shaping how you'll be remembered. Enemies will talk about your beard, not your fleas. Friends will boast of the firelight ritual, not your bedhead. And you'll feel like more than just a raider. You'll feel like a man carrying a tradition. The sun creeps higher, lighting the water in streaks of silver. Your beard is neat, your comb tucked safely away again. Around you, others do the same, slipping their tools into pouches, onto belts, or under cloaks. Not a single comb is left behind. Losing one would be like losing a blade. You stand, stretch, and look toward the horizon. The village waits unseen, but you know it's there. You stroke your beard once more, satisfied. Funny, isn't it? Of all the things in your gear, it's the comb that feels most personal, most defining. You pat the pouch where it rests, and for a moment, it feels like carrying a secret talisman. Another gull screeches overhead, mocking again, and you laugh out loud this time. Joke number 2. Even birds can't believe how obsessed you are with hair care before pillaging. But let them laugh, you know the truth. A Viking without a comb is like a sword without an edge. The morning is moving fast now, preparations nearly complete. You run your fingers through your beard one last time and feel the smoothness left by bone teeth. Ready. In more ways than one. The camp is restless now, shifting from yawns and stretching to sharper movements, to the clatter of weapons against shields, to the creak of leather straps being tightened. You sit nearby, still fiddling with your beard, and it's then that one of the older warriors produces a small clay jar. He pulls the lid with a thumb, and the smell hits you before you even see what's inside. Pungent, heavy, oily, like something dragged straight out of a whale carcass. He dips 2 fingers into the mixture and begins to massage it into his beard, humming to himself like this is nothing unusual. A couple of others gather closer, holding out their hands expectantly, like children waiting for honey. He scoops more and doles it out generously. When the jar comes your way, you hesitate. You're not sure you want your face smelling like a wharf in midsummer. But then again, who are you to refuse the Viking version of beard oil? You rub it between your palms, thick, sticky, and slightly warm from the fire, and then smooth it down through your beard. The smell is strong enough to make your eyes water, but the texture, surprisingly softening. Your beard, usually bristly like dried straw, suddenly feels tamed, sleek, even luxurious. It's as if your whiskers just got a spa day courtesy of a beached whale. Joke number 1 for this stretch: you've officially discovered the Viking equivalent of coconut oil, minus the Instagram influencers. The truth is, Norsemen used all sorts of fats and oils. Whale blubber, seal oil, sometimes even bear grease if they could get it. These weren't just for looks, they kept hair supple in freezing air and protected skin from drying out. And, whether by accident or design, the shine made beards look fuller and more impressive. When you stride into a village with your beard glistening like polished bronze, you're not just another raider. You're the embodiment of northern ferocity. There's even evidence that scented herbs were mixed in when available. Imagine rosemary, thyme, or juniper crushed into the fat, not only to mask the smell but also to lend a certain aura. It makes sense, raiding is terrifying enough, but raiding while smelling faintly of a forest or mountain meadow? That's psychological warfare with style. Historians still argue whether the oils were primarily functional or symbolic, but as you smooth the mixture into your whiskers, you can't deny how much calmer and sharper you feel. Across the fire, A burly man with a beard thick as a wolf pelt twirls the oiled strands between his fingers, shaping them into neat ropes. Like sails catching wind, he mutters, satisfied. Another younger warrior imitates him, though his beard is too patchy to hold much. The older men chuckle, reminding him that patience grows hair as surely as it grows courage. You smirk, it's oddly comforting, this obsession with something so mundane. The oil is starting to soak in now, giving your beard a heavy sheen. You tilt your face, catching a glimpse in the blade of your axe. The reflection is warped, but you can see enough to know the difference. You look sharper, somehow older, more deliberate. You wonder how much of Viking grooming was about convincing themselves that they belonged here, that each comb stroke and oil smear transformed nervous farmers into confident raiders. A gust of wind carries the smell of the jar back across camp, and several men wrinkle their noses. Smells like a fishmonger's armpit, one complains, though he's already reaching for another scoop. You laugh with them, joke number 2, because you can't help it. Viking beard oil was not designed for romance. But then again, what was more romantic in those days than not freezing to death? The jar passes again, and you notice the designs carved into its clay surface, swirls, lines, perhaps just decorative, or perhaps symbols of storms and whales. These details remind you that nothing was made casually. Even containers carried meaning. You turn it over in your hand, careful not to spill the last of its greasy contents, and think about how many raids this same jar might have seen. By now, the fire crackles lower, and men lean back, satisfied. Their beards glisten in the dim light, transformed from wild thickets into controlled cascades. One man braids his oiled strands into 2 neat cords, securing them with leather ties. Another runs his hands down to smooth the ends, muttering a prayer that the gods might notice. And maybe they do. Odin himself was said to value grooming, his beard shining with wisdom, his appearance always regal even in war. You can't help but wonder, would Odin have approved of whale fat conditioner? The morning stretches onward, the tide rising, the raid drawing nearer. But for now, you're caught in this strange ritual that blends practicality with vanity, superstition with necessity. You sniff your fingers, grimacing at the fishy tang, and chuckle, joke number 3. If nothing else, the smell might clear a battlefield by itself. Who needs swords when you have Oda whale? Yet, beneath the humor lies truth. These small acts matter. They set the tone, bond the group, and prepare you not just physically but mentally. A neat beard is more than hair, it's identity, confidence, even a shield against doubt. You feel it now, as the oil dries and your beard settles into something smoother, something stronger. The longship waits at the water's edge, ready for another push into destiny. You run your hands down your beard one last time, fingers gliding more easily than ever, and you understand why this ritual mattered so deeply. It isn't just about looking fierce. It's about carrying yourself with the dignity of someone who belongs in a saga, someone who will be remembered not for lice or scruff, but for the gleam of his whiskers in the morning sun. The whale fat clings stubbornly to your hands as you rub them against your cloak, trying to rid yourself of the greasy sheen. No luck, it just smears, adding yet another layer of evidence that you're a man who has embraced the smell of the sea a little too literally. Around you, though, no one seems to mind. In fact, some of the warriors look downright proud, smoothing their beards into shapes that are half weapon, half fashion statement. Now comes the next stage. Fingers dig in, twisting strands, dividing them into sections, pulling them tight. Braiding. The art of turning chaos into order. You watch the older men, their hands moving with the ease of years. They braid not for beauty, though the effect is impressive, but for function. A loose beard on the battlefield could snag against a strap or obscure your vision. A braided beard stays clear, neat, and intimidating. You pick up a handful of your own beard and begin the process. Divide, cross, pull. Divide, cross, pull. It's trickier than it looks. The hair resists, slipping from your grasp. You grumble under your breath and start again. One of your companions notices your struggle, smirking. "Need your mother for that," he teases, and the circle erupts in laughter. You grin back, firing joke number 1. "No, but maybe I'll borrow your sister, she seems handy with rope." The laughter doubles, echoing across the shoreline. The braiding continues, punctuated by small bursts of conversation. Someone tells the story of a warrior who once tied small bronze bells into his beard, so that every step into battle jingled like a festive goat. Quirky, ridiculous, and maybe true. You can't imagine it was practical, but you can see how it might terrify or amuse an enemy long enough to give him pause. And besides, Vikings loved flair. Historians still argue whether braiding styles carried symbolic meaning. Did a double braid signify rank? Did elaborate knots mean you'd earned victories? Or was it all just personal taste, like someone today deciding between a crew cut and a mullet? No one knows for certain, though sagas occasionally hint that braids were associated with strength and maturity. What you do know is that once your beard finally settles into 2 tight braids, you feel different. Sharper. Ready. The process isn't just practical, it's bonding. Men help one another, tugging strands, offering advice, even scolding. One man braids too loosely, and his neighbor yanks it apart with a grunt. Do it right or don't do it at all. You laugh at the scuffle, but secretly you admire the seriousness. For them, for you, this is preparation as important as sharpening a sword. Your fingers ache slightly, the hair pulling at your skin, but you persist until the braids hold firm. You tie the ends with strips of leather, tugging them into place. The sensation is odd, weightier than a loose beard, like carrying small ropes against your chest, but you like it. It keeps the whiskers out of your mouth, out of your food, out of your line of sight. Practical, intimidating, and neat. You catch a reflection in a puddle nearby and nod approvingly. The braids give you a fierceness you didn't feel before, as though your face itself has been weaponized. Joke number 2, if you ran into yourself in a dark alley, you'd hand over your wallet without even asking. Across the circle, some warriors are experimenting with other styles, small plaits hanging like tassels, single long braids twisted with cord, or even just tightly bound sections that resemble short ropes. You can see their personalities in each style. The brash young one goes for dramatic flair. The older, more seasoned man opts for a simple, efficient knot. Each style a reflection of who they are, and who they want to be remembered as. There's another layer to it, though. The braiding ritual forces you to sit still, to focus on something small before facing something enormous. It slows your breathing, steadies your hands, centers your thoughts. You realize it isn't just about keeping hair tidy, it's about control. In a life full of storms and swords, braiding is the rare act where you decide the outcome. One warrior finishes his braid, stands, and shakes it proudly. The ends swing like weighted ropes, glinting in the early light. Ready for war, he declares, though his grin betrays the pride of someone who just won a fashion contest. You can't resist, joke number 3 slips from your lips, ready for war, or ready for the village beauty contest. The others howl, slapping their thighs, and even he chuckles while adjusting his braid as if it's a crown. The laughter fades, leaving the sound of waves lapping and gulls squawking overhead. You run your fingers down the tight plaits, feeling the oil still clinging, and you're struck by how much of yourself you've poured into this ritual. It's more than grooming, it's transformation. You're not just a man anymore. You're part of a tradition, a brotherhood, a legend in the making. The braids hold, the camp stirs, and the day edges closer to what you know is coming. You smooth the ends one last time and tuck the comb back into your pouch. Somewhere inside, you sense that history isn't written in blood alone, but in details like this, the shine of a braid, the neatness of a knot, the way even in chaos, Vikings found time to tame their hair. Your braids feel tight against your chin, the weight tugging slightly as you stand and stretch. The camp hums with energy now, men double-checking shields and hefting axes, but before the longship is shoved back into the surf, there's a pause. Always a pause. Some warriors wander off toward the pools left by the tide, kneeling in the sand, leaning over with the seriousness of men consulting oracles. You follow, curious, and find yourself staring into the simplest of Viking mirrors, still water. There's no polished bronze here, no shiny silver like the wealthy might own, just a shallow puddle reflecting the sky. You crouch down, your knees popping, and peer into the rippling surface. The image wavers with each breath of wind, your braided beard dancing on the water like seaweed. You tilt your head, squint, adjust a stray strand with the care of someone trimming a masterpiece. It's ridiculous, checking your appearance in a puddle right before storming into someone else's home, but it feels important. The water calms and your reflection steadies. Your beard, slick with oil and tied in braids, frames your face with a ferocity that wasn't there yesterday. You lean closer, adjusting a loose hair, and think, this is the face that strangers will remember, the one that children might whisper about long after tonight. Joke number 1. You basically just invented the first Viking selfie. The truth is, Vikings did have mirrors of polished metal, but they were rare and costly, often owned by women or the wealthy. For most, a puddle, a stream, or a calm bit of seawater was good enough. Archaeologists have found fragments of bronze mirrors in graves, but whether raiders carried them on voyages is debated. Historians still argue whether polished metal mirrors were everyday items for warriors or just prized possessions tucked into burial rites. Either way, water was always there, free, practical, and just reflective enough. You lean back on your heels and watch another warrior make faces at his reflection, baring his teeth like a wolf, then adjusting his beard so it falls just right. Others laugh at him, but not too loudly, because most of them are doing the same thing. It's half vanity, half ritual, one last reassurance that the image they present to gods and men alike is the right one. The puddle isn't just a mirror, though. It carries weight. Some believe water holds omens. Ripples in a calm pool could mean disturbance ahead. A still surface could mean favor from the gods. You find yourself staring longer than necessary, half expecting to see something beyond your own reflection, maybe Odin's eye staring back, or the Norns weaving fate under the surface. You shake your head, chuckling softly. Joke number 2, if the water really does show fate, yours probably just looks like a bad hair day. Still, the act of checking, of fixing, is calming. You smooth your braids, tug the leather ties tighter, and splash a little water onto your face. The cold shocks you awake, biting through the haze of sleep and salt. Others follow suit, washing the grease and sweat from their brows, patting their cheeks, even rinsing their combs. It's practical, clean water is rare at sea, but it also feels ritualistic, a miniature baptism before chaos. One warrior crouches beside you, his beard shorter, scruffier, but he stares into the puddle with the intensity of someone studying runes. He mutters under his breath, words you don't catch, then nods sharply and stands. You wonder what he saw. Confidence, fear, or nothing but ripples. You stay a moment longer. The sun is rising now, casting gold over the water. Your reflection glows, each strand catching light, every braid precise. You grin, satisfied. Joke number 3, if the gods are watching, at least they'll know you died fabulous. The moment lingers, then fades as the call goes up, time to launch. Warriors leave the pools, faces wet, beards adjusted, spirits steadied. You rise too, giving the puddle one last glance. The water ripples as you stand, distorting your reflection until it's gone. But you carry the image with you, tucked in your mind, like armor. Back at the ship, men grip the hull and push, muscles straining, boots sinking in wet sand. The longship slides forward with a groan, then meets the tide with a splash. Oars clatter into place, shields line the rails, and your beard, freshly admired in its watery mirror, feels like part of your gear, as important as the axe at your side. The sea swallows the prow, the horizon beckons, and though your stomach knots at what's coming, you touch your braids once more and breathe easier. You've looked fate in the puddle, and fate looked back with approval. At least, that's what you tell yourself as the sail snaps open and the coastline slips away. The longship cuts through the waves once more, and the salt spray lashes against your face like tiny whips. You taste the ocean on your lips, briny and bitter, and instinctively reach up to stroke your beard. The braids hold, slick from the oil, but already strands rebel against your careful handiwork. You tug them back into place, thinking of what your reflection told you in that puddle. A warrior's beard is never just hair. It's a story, and sometimes a very loud one. Around you, the men settle into the rhythm of rowing, oars dipping like clockwork. Some chant softly, some grin wolfishly at the horizon, but more than a few keep adjusting their beards. It's clear that for them, as for you, these whiskers aren't vanity. They're banners of status. Beard length means something here. The older warriors wear theirs long, braided into thick ropes that swing with each pull of the oar. Those long beards mark them as seasoned, as men who've lived through storms and sword edges. The younger ones, with shorter scruff, are teased mercilessly. One lad, no more than 20, gets called goat chin for the patchy fuzz he's still trying to coax into manhood. He laughs along, but you can see the sting. You remember being him, tugging at your jaw as though wishing hair would sprout faster. Here's your historical fact for this stretch. Viking sagas and poems often described warriors by their beards, blue-bearded, long-bearded, even gold-bearded. These weren't just throwaway details, they were identifiers, markers of character. A man's beard was his biography written on his face. But there's a quirky tidbit too. Some sagas hint that excessive beard length could be a liability, a target of mockery if it seemed impractical. Imagine tripping over your own whiskers. In fact, a few stories tell of insults traded in battle that revolved around hair. One warrior supposedly accused another of nursing lice in his beard like a farmer feeds pigs. Brutal. Almost worse than being stabbed. And that's the thing, mockery had weight. A scraggly beard could get you dismissed as a low-born farmer, someone unfit for the glory of raiding. Historians still argue whether these perceptions were universally held or just literary embellishments, but the sagas suggest that your beard length and neatness shouted your status louder than your jewelry did. You tug at your braids again, making sure they sit right. Long enough to command respect, neat enough to avoid ridicule. Somewhere in between lies honor. One of your companions leans over, squinting at you with mock seriousness. That beard of yours. Says you've seen 2 battles but cried in both. The rowers around him howl with laughter, and you respond with joke number 1. Better than your beard, it says you've never even survived a stew. More laughter, more jabs, and yet the teasing only strengthens the bond. Insults about beards are a safe outlet, a way to poke without wounding. The rhythm of oars continues, water slapping against wood. You study the warriors closest to you, seeing how their beards match their personalities. The proud chieftain, his beard streaked with grey, sits tall, his long braids weighted with small bronze rings. The young rower, cheeks barely shaded with fuzz, avoids eye contact whenever the older ones point at his chin. And you, somewhere in the middle, find yourself wondering what your beard says. Strong enough. Old enough. Brave enough. The truth is, a beard was a badge you couldn't fake. You could steal treasure, boast of deeds, even lie about battles, but your beard grew only with time, patience, and survival. Every inch was earned. That's why enemies noticed too. Anglo-Saxon writers sneered about the effeminate cleanliness of the Northmen, but they couldn't deny the impression a full, braided beard made. Imagine being a farmer, facing raiders who not only outnumber you but look like walking forest spirits, hair flowing like banners of doom. That's psychological warfare at its finest. You shift on your bench, the calluses in your palms burning, and stroke your beard again. There's comfort in it, like touching proof that you belong here. The teasing fades into silence, the waves steady, and for a moment you almost forget the raid ahead. Almost. Another joke slips from your lips, joke number 2. If we spent half as much time training as we do grooming, we'd conquer the whole world by now. A few chuckles ripple through the ship, though one man smirks and says, "Who says we haven't?" That thought lingers. Maybe grooming wasn't wasted time. Maybe it was part of what gave Vikings their edge, their reputation. They weren't just barbarians, they were calculated, aware of image, masters of turning appearance into fear. The horizon grows clearer, a faint smudge of land becoming sharper with each stroke. Your heart thumps harder. You tug your braids one last time, tightening the leather ties, making sure they'll hold. Around you, men do the same, each stroke of hand or comb a silent vow. And then, as the prow dips into a rising swell, one warrior mutters, "The gods judge a man by his beard." Everyone laughs, but not too loudly. It feels true, even if it's said as a joke. You smile, stroking your chin, and tuck that line away for yourself. Joke number 3, but also a mantra: if the gods are watching, at least your beard won't let you down. The longship glides closer to land now, sails snapping with the shift of wind, and you smell something new on the air, not just salt or tar, but the faint musk of earth, grass, and wood smoke. It stirs your senses, makes your pulse quicken. Yet even with the shore looming, even with battle waiting, the men around you keep fussing over their beards. The ritual isn't done. There's one last touch to add: scent. You reach into the small leather pouch hanging at your belt. Inside, mixed with bits of dried bread and flint shards, are sprigs of herbs you plucked days ago. Sage, maybe thyme, maybe something you can't quite name anymore, now brittle and sharp. You crumble a piece between your fingers, rub it into your beard, and breathe deep. The green smell cuts through the sea stink, masking sweat and whale fat oil. It's not perfume exactly, it's armor for the nose. Fact first, excavations of Viking graves have turned up traces of herbs, sometimes scattered around bodies, sometimes stuffed into pouches. While often linked to rituals or burial rites, it's not impossible they doubled as deodorants, tucked into beards or tunics to fight the reek of travel. After all, weeks on a longship with no baths. Yeah, you'd try anything too. A quirky tidbit adds flavor. There are references in Norse sources to warriors chewing fragrant herbs before battle, not for minty breath exactly, but to steady nerves. Imagine your raiding buddy leaning over, reeking of dill, while assuring you he's ready for glory. It sounds funny, but it might have worked. Still, historians argue whether herbs were widely used for grooming, or if we're just projecting modern hygiene habits backward. Maybe the dried sprigs were for rituals, maybe for medicine, maybe only for funerals. No one can say for certain, but right now, pressed against your beard, they make you feel cleaner, calmer, and strangely prepared. You glance around and see others doing the same. One warrior tucks a sprig of rosemary above his ear, another braids thyme straight into his whiskers. A third smears resinous pine sap onto his beard, muttering something about warding off bad luck. He smells like a Christmas tree, but nobody dares mock him. Superstition is contagious in these moments. You rub more of the herb dust into your beard and grin. Joke number 1. You suddenly realize you've just made yourself the Viking equivalent of a scented candle. Not intimidating, maybe, but definitely refreshing. The air grows heavier as the ship closes the gap to land. You smell wood smoke stronger now, maybe from a village hearth, maybe from a monastery kitchen. Your stomach growls, reminding you how long it's been since you ate something besides dried fish. The thought of raiding almost feels secondary to the thought of hot bread. Still, you know the scent in your beard is no small thing. When villagers see you, they'll notice the hair first, the braids, the oil, the swagger, and maybe, if they're close enough, the faint aroma of herbs. A beard that smells better than the battlefield around it. That's more than vanity, that's intimidation by contrast. Another warrior nudges you, holding up his own sprig of fennel. "Think this'll impress the gods?" he asks. You shrug, then joke number 2. "Depends, are you hoping for Odin's blessing or Freyja's phone number?" The laughter eases the tension, shoulders relax, oars dip more smoothly into water. Humor is as vital as grooming. There's another angle here too. Scent means memory. You think of home, wood smoke curling from your hearth, herbs drying above the fire, your mother or wife crushing leaves to season stew. That same smell now drifts from your beard, mingling home and raid, comfort and fear. The herbs are a bridge, a reminder of why you fight and what waits if you return. The longship grinds suddenly against sand and shingle, throwing men forward. You brace with your legs, hands gripping the gunwale, heart hammering. The prow settles, warriors spring into action, shields pulled free, axes hefted. But even here, in the frenzy of landfall, some pause for a last tug at their beards, a last adjustment of herbs tucked into braids. Ritual must be honored, even if arrows rain from the cliffs above. One man smears extra herb paste across his mustache, his grin wild. He smells like basil and pine mixed together. Another mutters that the scent will fool spirits, masking mortal flesh. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were widespread or just poetic flourishes, but standing here with the herbs crackling in your whiskers, you believe it. As you leap onto the damp shore, your boots sinking into sand, the smell hits you again. Stronger now, alive, blending with salt and smoke. You breathe deep. The herbs burn in your nose, sting your eyes, but they steady your heart. You feel both ridiculous and invincible at once, like someone who knows he might not survive but refuses to smell like fear. You grin again, brushing your beard, thinking joke number 3. If you die today, at least the crows will say, he tasted like time. It's morbid, sure, but the thought makes you chuckle as you shoulder your shield and march inland. The herbs cling, the braids hold, the beard swings like a banner as you stride forward. And though the ground shakes beneath you with the pounding of 100 boots, it's your beard, the scent, the shine, the ritual that makes you feel ready for whatever waits beyond the next hill. The first stretch inland is quiet. Too quiet, actually. Your boots squelch in marshy earth, your shield knocks softly against your hip, and every so often you hear the groan of leather straps tightening as men adjust their gear. Yet, amid all that, the loudest sound seems to be grooming. You glance sideways and see warriors still tugging combs through their whiskers, herbs still poking from braids, oil still shining faintly in the rising sun. Here's the truth. Keeping your beard neat is a constant battle, one that doesn't pause just because you're about to start another kind of battle. Every stray strand feels like betrayal, every knot like weakness. And the punishment for letting it go? Oh, it's not death, not disgrace in battle, it's worse. It's mockery. Fact of the day, accounts from contemporaries of the Vikings, especially English monks, note that Norsemen were exceedingly clean compared to other peoples. They washed, they combed, and yes, they trimmed their beards. Neglecting grooming wasn't just lazy, it invited ridicule, even suspicion. Imagine being called a sloven by men who literally spent months in cramped boats. That's saying something. Quirky tidbit for you. There's an Icelandic saga where a man is insulted not for cowardice or poor swordsmanship, but for being shaggy as a troll. Troll-like whiskers weren't intimidating, they were comical. No one wanted to look like a creature from a bedtime story meant to scare kids. They wanted sharp, shining, controlled. Even raiders had standards. And historians still argue whether these grooming jabs were mainly humorous or whether they carried real social weight. Was an unkempt beard just a joke among friends, or could it brand you as untrustworthy, even unlucky? The sagas don't give straight answers, and so the debate lingers. You tighten your grip on your shield, thinking back to the last feast. You remember a warrior stumbling into the hall with his beard matted from travel, his comb lost at sea. Before he even sat, jibes flew. Someone shouted, "Shall we feed the birds nesting in your chin?" Another offered him a firebrand to burn the lice from their new palace. He laughed it off, but you noticed how he slipped away early, shoulders slumped. A messy beard had cut deeper than any blade that night. And of course, you've been on the receiving end too. That one time you neglected to oil your beard before a raid, and the salt spray left it stiff and clumped. The others howled. One called you seaweed face. Another said your beard looked like a drowned sheep. 4 days afterward, every glance felt like it lingered on your chin. You vowed never again. Now, marching inland, you tug through the strands again. Even the anticipation of combat doesn't outweigh the need to look formidable. Beard neat, braids tight, herbs tucked. You know they'll notice if you slip. Joke number 1 slips from your lips as you glance at the man beside you. Better to fall in battle than to live with a crooked braid. He snorts, but doesn't deny it, just tugs his plait straighter. The village finally comes into sight. A few wooden huts, smoke curling lazily from chimneys, livestock grazing in the fields. It looks peaceful, unprepared. You expect fear soon, screaming, the clang of steel. But for the moment, what you notice most are your comrades fussing like men preparing for a banquet. One spits into his hand and smooths his beard flat. Another plucks a single stubborn hair from his chin, tosses it to the wind like an offering. It's absurd, isn't it? Death just over the hill, and you're all preoccupied with grooming. But you realize it's more than vanity, it's ritual. This rhythm of comb, oil, herb, mockery, repeat. It binds you, reminds you that you're more than killers. You're a people with customs, with standards, even with humor. Joke number 2 bubbles up. If Odin wanted us to fight dirty, he wouldn't have invented combs. A few chuckles ripple through the shield wall, though one warrior mutters his pretty sure combs came from elk bones, not gods. The march slows, the formation tightens, and silence spreads again. You feel the weight of eyes, your own and theirs, checking beards, glances darting, silent judgments passed. You smooth your braid once more, thinking of what it says about you. Clean, ready, sharp. A beard like a spearhead, not a bird's nest. The village dogs bark now, sensing something wrong. Children's voices echo faintly, unaware of what's coming. Your comrades grip their weapons tighter, yet still, even here, they fuss at their whiskers one last time. You almost laugh. Joke number 3. One day, bards will sing about how we conquered half the world armed with combs. And in truth, it doesn't feel far off. For Vikings, grooming is part of war. To look fierce is to be fierce, to be neat is to be feared. And if you forget that, well, someone will remind you. Cruelly, loudly, and with a grin. So you march forward, beard gleaming, herbs clinging, oil shimmering faintly. Ahead, there will be steel and screams. But right now the worst fate you can imagine is someone pointing and saying, "Crooked braid." The dogs keep barking, sharp and anxious, but instead of charging immediately into chaos, your group halts on the edge of the village. Shields stay up, weapons ready, yet there's no mad dash. There's time for what matters most, apparently. The combing drifts into something else, something bigger than grooming. It turns into performance. One man sits on a stump and combs his beard with exaggerated flair, each stroke dramatic, as if he's a scald on a stage. Another hums a low chant, rhythmic, matching the comb's teeth tugging through hair. Soon the others pick it up. A rise, a fall, a droning tone that somehow steadies your heartbeat. The grooming ritual shifts into something communal, almost holy. Here's your grounded fact: Viking life was full of ritual. Archaeological digs show that even small, everyday objects like combs were sometimes carved with designs hinting at magical or protective functions. Grooming wasn't just personal hygiene, it could slide easily into ritual, with chants, gestures, and shared acts layering practical with spiritual. The quirky tidbit: there are stories of warriors mocking one another mid-grooming, not just for messiness, but for the noises they made. Apparently, some men groaned or sighed like pampered nobles when combing out tangles. Imagine pausing before a raid to make fun of your comrade's luxury sounds. It's absurd, but you've seen it happen. And of course, historians still argue whether these so-called grooming rituals had formal meaning. Were they religious acts tied to gods, or just social bonding exaggerated into tradition? The sources leave gaps, sagas blur the line, and archaeologists squint at bone combs wondering if they're sacred artifacts or just, well, combs. But here and now, it doesn't feel silly. The hum builds, echoing across the field. Fingers tug through whiskers in unison, oils glisten, braids tighten. The men grin at each other, teeth flashing, eyes narrowing. The teasing slips naturally into this rhythm too. One warrior with a crooked mustache gets a jab, that braid's so twisted it belongs in a riddle. Another has herbs sticking out at odd angles, and someone quips, "Careful, the cows will eat you." You join in, combing, laughing, humming. It's absurdly comforting. Joke number 1 surfaces: if the villagers don't flee at the sight of us, maybe they'll die laughing at our jokes. The line breaks the chant for a moment, replaced by chuckles and nudges. The sound, though whether chant or laughter, spreads beyond your band. A villager appears at the edge of a field, wide-eyed, clutching a stick. He hears the hum, sees the neat beards gleaming like dark waves, and freezes. To him, it must look like sorcery, like a brotherhood of spirits combing themselves before unleashing doom. He bolts, and the chant only grows louder. Joke number 2 slips out from someone behind you. Imagine telling your ancestors you terrified a man with a comb. But in truth, it works. The psychological effect is real. Neat beards, synchronized chants, mocking humor, it isn't random. It builds unity in you and terror in them. The air feels charged now, like the moment before lightning cracks. You sense your comrade stiffen, eyes sharp. The combing slows, hands set combs aside, but the bond lingers. You're not just individuals anymore, you're a woven braid yourselves, tight, resilient, purposeful. You remember once, long ago, when you tried raiding with a half-prepared crew. No ritual, no chants, no joking, just silent nerves and sweaty palms. The raid itself went fine, you took what you wanted, but it felt hollow, empty. The brotherhood wasn't there. The camaraderie came from grooming, laughing, preparing together. You hadn't understood until later, when bards sang the raid's tale but skipped over the silence. There was no story in it. Now, combs tucked back in pouches, braids straight, herbs secured, the ritual's teasing finale comes. One warrior leans over, mock serious, and checks your beard, squinting like a master craftsman inspecting his work. "Chem," he says, "acceptable. But the gods won't give you their best table in Valhalla with that frizz." The laughter rolls again, shields tapping the ground like applause. Joke number 3 pops from your lips without thinking. "Fine, then I'll eat with Loki and steal his dessert." The roar of laughter shakes the line, turning tension into shared strength. And then, just like that, the hum fades. Silence rushes back in, heavy and electric. The combing ritual is over. The teasing has sealed the bond. The village waits, unaware of how much of its fate was decided not by steel, but by hair, laughter, and rhythm. You adjust your grip on your shield. The smell of herbs still clings in your beard, the oil shines faintly in the rising light. Your heart beats steady, your mind clear. Whatever happens next, you are not alone. You are part of a ritual older than memory, grooming turned into unity, teasing turned into strength. The dogs bark louder. Shouts rise from the huts. A bell clangs somewhere, sharp and frantic. The moment has come. And yet, you reach up one last time, fingers tugging at a single strand of your beard, checking, adjusting, as if the gods themselves are watching your grooming. Because in a way, maybe they are. The village is fully awake now. Smoke thickens as cooking fires are abandoned and torches are lit in panic. Children cry, women shout, and somewhere a man slams shut a wooden gate that probably won't hold for long. But even before the clash begins, you know this moment will be remembered not just by your band, but by the people who see you. Foreign eyes are always watching. Slavic traders drifting into river ports, Frankish merchants along the coast, even frightened Anglo-Saxon monks scribbling in dim scriptoria. They see you, they see the braids and oils and combed whiskers, and they gossip. Not about your swords, those they expect. Not about your ships, they fear those already. What they never fail to remark upon is your grooming. Here's the plain fact. Chroniclers like John of Wallingford wrote that Norsemen bathed weekly, combed daily, and kept their hair neat, details that shocked locals who washed only a handful of times each year. To foreigners, it was baffling. How could men so terrifying on the battlefield care so much about cleanliness and appearance? A quirky tidbit pops up from memory. An English cleric once complained that Viking men, with their combed hair and pagan perfumes, were too attractive to local women. Some even blamed Viking grooming for leading Christian women astray. Imagine that, your beard oil accused of breaking marriages. But historians still argue whether these descriptions were exaggerations, written to demonize outsiders, or whether Viking grooming really did stand out so sharply from their neighbors. Was the combing ritual as meticulous as the monks described, or did they amplify it to explain why Norsemen seemed dangerously appealing? The ink is faded, the truth slippery. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze fitting on your shield and think, maybe they weren't exaggerating. Right now, on the edge of this village, you feel like a walking contradiction. Warrior, raider, groomed gentleman. The beard is as much a weapon as the axe. Around you, comrades grin, teeth gleaming through neat whiskers. One jokes, joke number one of the moment, if the monks write about us again, I hope they mention how handsome we looked. The laughter that follows is sharp, quick, nervous. Humor makes the waiting bearable. The first defenders appear, a handful of men with farm tools and a single rusted sword. They shout, trying to sound braver than they feel. And still, before you lift your shield, one of your own tucks an herb sprig deeper into his braid. Another quickly smooths his mustache with 2 fingers, muttering about first impressions. Even now, appearance comes first. You remember stories from your youth, told by elders around smoky hearths. Tales of rust traders in the East writing home about Viking grooming kits, bone combs, tweezers, even little ear scoops. Foreigners bought them, admired them, sometimes stole them. Your people's reputation wasn't just for raiding, but for setting trends. Strange, isn't it? To be feared and envied in the same breath. Joke number 2 slips from someone in your shield wall. We should sell beard oil to these villagers before raiding them. A proper trade. A few chuckles ripple through, though one man mutters he'd rather trade steel. The villagers huddle tighter, gripping their makeshift weapons. Fear is clear in their eyes, and you realize, they see not savages, but something worse. They see order. They see men who cared enough to braid, oil, and chant before marching. To them, that grooming signals discipline, not vanity. It promises efficiency in what comes next. And yet, it isn't all intimidation. Some foreign eyes gaze with fascination. You think of women on riverbanks, watching longships glide by, their faces a mix of fear and curiosity. Did they whisper about your sharp beards, about how different you looked from their own husbands? Did they admire it in secret? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Historians will argue forever. Still, even now, standing before the first clash, you sense the truth. Image travels farther than steel. Traders carry rumors. Monks ink descriptions. Neighbors gossip. And always, the beard comes up. Joke number 3 leaves your lips as you brace your shield. If my beard makes it into a monk's scroll, I hope he gets the braid right. More laughter. Laughter that steadies the line. The defenders shout again, their voices breaking. Your comrades answer with the crash of shields. Yet in the space between those sounds, you feel foreign eyes upon you, not just the villagers here, but distant scribes, wandering merchants, future storytellers. They'll remember how you looked as much as what you did. And so you smooth your beard one last time, as if grooming is the truest part of this raid. Because maybe it is. Torches spit sparks in the damp wind, and the village's rough wooden walls throw back a glow like frightened eyes. But before shields crash and doors splinter, the last preparations are subtle, personal, almost decorative. You glance at your comrade to the left and notice it, something glinting in his beard. A small bit of polished bronze, twisted like a spiral, woven neatly between strands. He smirks, tugging at it with pride, as though this trinket matters as much as the axe at his side. That's the truth of it, beard charms and amulets. Archaeologists have uncovered small pendants shaped like Thor's hammer, sometimes light enough to hang from braids. Others were beads of glass, amber, or metal threaded into whiskers. They weren't just for beauty, they could be protective, symbolic, or even serve as silent boasts of wealth and connections. The quirky tidbit here is stranger. Some sagas mention warriors braiding in teeth, yes, actual human teeth, as tokens from enemies or ancestors. Imagine leaning close in the firelight and seeing a molar dangling from your friend's mustache. It's hard not to laugh at the absurdity, though maybe you wouldn't if the tooth belonged to someone you just fought. Historians still argue whether these charms were superstition, fashion, or both. Did warriors believe they carried divine power, or were they simply flaunting shiny objects to dazzle and intimidate? The sagas blur fact and flair, and the burial finds never whisper the intent behind them. You feel your own beard. No trinkets today, just oil and herbs, but you think back to a feast months ago when a trader brought thin silver beads from across the sea. The way men scrambled for them was almost comical, hulking warriors reduced to squabbling children chasing shiny toys. One even tried to prove his beard strength by stringing 5 beads in a row. It pulled so hard his mustache drooped for a week. Joke number 1, murmured then and remembered now, nothing says fearsome raider like a lopsided mustache. Tonight, the atmosphere around you is heavier, yet the glint of charms keeps spirits buoyant. One man braids in a bird-shaped amulet, claiming it honors Odin's ravens. Another pulls a bead from a pouch and slides it into place, declaring it will distract foes long enough for him to land the killing blow. The others laugh, but no one truly mocks him. Superstition and strategy blur too easily in moments like these. A defender calls from beyond the field, voice shaking but defiant. You don't hear his words clearly, but they sound like threats of God's vengeance. Your comrade leans close, tugging his beard bead so it catches the firelight. If their God smites us, at least I'll look magnificent doing it. Joke number 2, perfectly timed, breaks the tension. And yet, beneath the jokes, there's reverence. Each charm feels like a whisper of protection, whether from gods, ancestors, or just personal belief. You recall how one elder swore that a single bronze bead in his beard turned aside death 3 times. Was it luck? Faith? Coincidence? Historians can debate, but in the moment of danger, men cling to what comforts them. You notice a younger warrior fumbling with a wooden bead, hands trembling too much to thread it through. Another man, older, calmer, helps him, steady fingers weaving the braid with practiced ease. That simple act, fatherly almost, says more about brotherhood than any chant. The younger one breathes easier, shoulders straightening, as if the bead itself grants courage. Joke number 3 floats out from behind you. If I fall tonight, bury me with extra beads so at least the next life has style. The laughter that follows is rough but genuine, echoing off the shield rims. You tug at your beard again, imagining what a foreigner might see, not barbarians, but men who decorate themselves like nobles, who march into danger with charms and amulets glittering in the torchlight. That blend of terror and beauty must unsettle them more than brute savagery ever could. And as you take your place in the line, shield angled, axe balanced, you feel the weight of unseen eyes again, traders, monks, storytellers, wondering what the charms meant. They'll write, they'll argue, they'll speculate. But you know the truth. Sometimes it's power, sometimes it's pride, and sometimes it's just the small comfort of shining when the world might end at dawn. The chants fade, the torches flare, the charms gleam. And you are ready. The torchlight dances higher as you tighten your grip on the shield, and suddenly the air feels electric, charged with the smell of smoke, sweat, and anticipation. You can almost see the villagers' fear stretching across the gap between you, and it dawns on you that half the battle is already won before a single axe swings. Because what they see isn't just a mob of raiders, it's the spectacle, the neatly braided beards, the gleaming charms, the disciplined rhythm of combed warriors marching in unison. This is fearsome first impressions at work. A polished beard is more than vanity, it's theater. Historical fact tells us that intimidation mattered as much as weapons. A line of uniform warriors, well-groomed and steady, could break the resolve of opponents who saw not ragged pirates but organized professionals. Archaeologists even found that Viking combs were some of the most common grave goods, suggesting that appearance wasn't optional, but integral to identity. And then comes the quirky tidbit. One saga describes a man nicknamed Silkybeard, said to have had such smooth, shining whiskers that enemies supposedly hesitated before striking him, as if they didn't want to ruin the display. Whether that's poetic exaggeration or truth lost in the mist, you can't help but grin at the idea of whiskers doubling as armor. Historians still argue whether Vikings consciously styled themselves for psychological warfare or if neat grooming was simply cultural pride that coincidentally frightened opponents. Were tidy beards meant to send a message, or did terrified villagers just interpret them as signs of impossible discipline? The debate remains, as misty as the breath in the cold air before you. Your comrade beside you whispers joke number 1. Their gait looks strong. But not as strong as my mustache. The chuckle ripples down the line, softening nerves just enough. The defenders shift, and you can see the doubt flicker in their eyes. They expected ragged marauders, perhaps drunk and filthy. Instead, they see rows of polished warriors, charms glinting, hair tied back, beards combed like they're about to attend a feast rather than a fight. And that, oddly enough, terrifies them more. It makes sense. Imagine if a band of scraggly vagabonds appeared at your door today, shouting threats. Scary, yes. But imagine if they showed up in perfectly tailored suits, hair slicked, smiles sharp and rehearsed. There's a different edge to that terror. It feels inevitable, unstoppable, rehearsed. That's what your enemies see in you now. Someone in your shield wall mutters joke number 2, when they tell stories about us, I hope they describe me as the handsome one. It draws another ripple of laughter, quickly hushed as the defenders advance with makeshift spears. The truth is, appearance buys you seconds, maybe even minutes, where fear does the work steel doesn't have to. In those seconds, villagers waver, grip weapons less firmly, question their odds. And in battle, hesitation is deadly. The eerie quiet before the clash stretches long, broken only by the creak of leather and the faint jingle of charms in braids. You imagine how the monks will write this scene later, quills scratching about men with shining hair and neatly kept beards who descended like demons. They'll leave out the nervous laughter, the inside jokes, the self-conscious mustache smoothing. But they'll remember the impression, because impressions last longer than details. Joke number 3 slips from your lips this time. If I die tonight, make sure my beard is straight before they write about me. The men closest to you laugh, one nearly snorting, though his knuckles whiten on the spear. A villager shouts again, and though his words are lost in the wind, the tone is desperation. You stand taller, letting your combed beard sway slightly in the torchlight, a deliberate gesture. You see the hesitation it plants. Appearance, once again, wields its own blade. The line braces. Shields angle. The first wave is seconds away. And you realize, almost with amusement, that the grooming ritual around the campfire wasn't just habit, it was a weapon sharpened in its own right. Fear by tidiness. Terror by symmetry. Horror by hygiene. And as your comrades raise their voices in a final growl, you smooth your beard one last time, because even in chaos, first impressions are forever. The crash finally comes. Shields slam, wood splinters, and the torchlit night explodes with the sound of men grunting, shouting, stumbling. Yet even in the middle of this storm, your mind wanders strangely, caught on the rituals that brought you here. The combs, the oils, the charms. Why do they matter so much when survival feels this fragile? Because for your people, appearance is memory. Victories fade, loot gets spent, bones turn to dust, but reputation lingers. And what sticks in reputation? Stories of how you looked. You realize that combing the beard before a raid isn't just vanity, it's planting yourself into legend. Historical fact whispers in burials across Scandinavia, archaeologists uncover combs tucked beside warriors as often as swords. That tells you all you need to know. The comb was not a trinket, it was identity, as symbolic as a blade. A quirky tidbit drifts in too. One saga tells of a Viking who carried not just one comb but 2, boasting that if the first broke mid-journey, he would never risk being seen untidy. Imagine stopping in the middle of a raid to pull out your backup comb. The image almost makes you laugh, though it probably wouldn't be funny to the unlucky villagers in that story. And still, historians argue. Was grooming truly a spiritual act, tied to rituals of readiness, or was it just about looking good? Did warriors believe gods favored the orderly, or did they simply enjoy the confidence that came with neatness? You'll never know for certain, but in this moment you feel it, it matters, even here in the clash. You slam your shield forward, hear the grunt of a defender stumbling back. A comrade to your right lands a blow, and the torchlight catches his braided beard as it swings. For a second, it looks almost ceremonial, as if the fight itself is another ritual in the grooming process. You can't help yourself, joke number 1 bursts out between breaths. At least if I bleed, it'll stain evenly on the braid. The fight presses harder. Villagers retreat, doors creak under assault, children scream from hiding places. Yet amid the violence, you glimpse flashes of the strange elegance of your band. A bronze bead gleaming as a man swings his axe. A sprig of herb bouncing in rhythm with footsteps. Combed whiskers framing grim determination. The whole thing has a twisted sense of choreography, as though you rehearsed not just the raid but the look of it. Another man shouts joke number 2, wheezing between swings, "If my beard gets cut, I'm suing Odin." The laughter that follows is half madness, half release, but it steals the line. Through the chaos, you think of what happens after. Tomorrow, or weeks from now, survivors will tell the tale. They won't recall exact numbers or tactics, but they'll remember the gleam of braids, the neatness of mustaches, the terrifying calm of men who combed before killing. That memory will spread faster than longships on a tide. And maybe that's the legacy. Not just plunder or conquest, But the image left behind, the paradox of savagery dressed in tidiness. It sticks in the mind because it doesn't fit. And the things that don't fit become legend. One of your comrades pauses briefly to tie back a loose strand, muttering something about dignity. Even here, he refuses to fight with hair in his eyes. Joke number 3 slips in, someone shouting, "Hold the gate, he's fixing his hair." The absurdity sparks another round of laughter, and strangely, it makes the push stronger. You realize, then, that grooming rituals serve another purpose too: unity. Every man who combed beside the fire shared in the same quiet preparation. Every bead and braid is a symbol of belonging. Now, in the melee, those little touches are reminders that you're part of something larger, a brotherhood that blends style with steel. The defenders falter. Their shouts crack, their line buckles. You hear the thud of a door giving way. And through it all, the image of the campfire combing lingers in your mind, softer than the violence around you, but somehow sharper in meaning. That ritual wasn't wasted time, it was the thread tying this chaos into order. You breathe hard, sweat stinging your eyes, beard damp against your skin. And you think, long after this night, when even you are gone, the stories told will include the details you tended with such care. The comb, the oil, the braid. Because for the Vikings, the beard wasn't just hair. It was history waiting to be remembered. The smoke hangs heavy now, thicker than the mist on a fjord morning, and every breath tastes of wood and ash. The gate has fallen, the defenders scatter, and the rhythm of the raid shifts from clash to aftermath. Yet even in this chaos, your fingers instinctively brush your beard again, as if checking that the braids remain, that the oils haven't all been lost to sweat. It's absurd, maybe, but it feels necessary because survival is temporary, but how you're remembered is forever. One historical fact flickers in your mind: chroniclers in distant monasteries often described Vikings not as ragged, but as well kept. One even wrote in disbelief that these raiders groomed more than the nobles of our own courts. That says everything. Your enemies noticed not just the weapons, but the combs, the braids, the polished look. They thought it strange, unsettling, unnatural even. And that strangeness made the memory last. The quirky tidbit that drifts back is even stranger. In some accounts, defeated villagers claimed Vikings smelled too pleasant to be ordinary men. Imagine that you've just lost your home, and the thing that sticks is the faint whiff of herbal beard oil. You almost want to laugh at the thought of reputation hinging on fragrance, but there it is. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on grooming was cultural pride, superstition, or deliberate intimidation. Were combs tucked into graves because they symbolized purity, or simply because no Viking wanted to arrive in Valhalla looking unkempt? Was the oil for beauty, or for health, or for scaring enemies with foreign scents? The debates rage on, unanswered. Your comrades gather near the firelight again, voices low, shoulders heavy with exhaustion and triumph. And once more, the small jokes return like embers refusing to die. Joke number 1 comes from a man stroking his beard, singed at the tips. "Well, looks like I invented the first curling iron." Laughter, tired but real, ripples through the group. Another dips his beard into a waterskin, wringing it out dramatically, and quips joke number 2. "Forget loot, next time, I'm raiding for conditioner." Even in the shadow of violence, humor clings like smoke. And your mind drifts again to legacy. You know how stories work. Survivors will spread tales, scribes will exaggerate, poets will embellish. Yet one image will remain constant: the raiders who combed their beards before they came. One last joke rises, softer than the others, almost a sigh. A young warrior with beads still gleaming in his braids murmurs, "If I fall tonight, let the sagas call me beautiful." The line hushes, then smiles. Joke number 3, but it lands deeper, half jest, half prayer. And as the night stretches, you feel it settle in your bones. Grooming wasn't an afterthought. It was ritual, unity, intimidation, memory, legacy. The beard wasn't vanity, it was a canvas of identity, woven, oiled, combed into permanence. The raid will end, loot will be divided, ships will sail again. But centuries from now, someone will still whisper about the warriors who polished their beards before war. That is your inheritance, and your gift to legend. The clamor softens, the shouting fades, and the last torch sputters low. You feel your heart slow, your breath lengthen, and the edges of the night blur into something calmer. The firelight shrinks, the smoke thins, and the memory of combs, oils, and braids dissolves like ripples on still water. It's easy now to imagine the sound of a quiet breeze across a northern coast, the soft brush of waves against a ship resting at anchor. The warriors are no longer clashing, they are just men again, weary and drowsy, leaning against their shields, adjusting a braid here or smoothing a mustache there with sleepy pride. The fear, the fire, the fury all drift away, leaving only the soft rhythm of breath and the faint scent of herbs in the cool night air. You picture the combs tucked carefully back into leather pouches, little tools that have witnessed both calm firesides and violent raids, resting now in silence. They become symbols of care, of humanity, of the way, even in the hardest lives, people find comfort in small rituals. Let that same sense of ritual soothe you. Imagine brushing away the clutter of the day, smoothing the tangles of thought, braiding worries into neat strands you can set aside until tomorrow. Each breath is a comb stroke, each exhale a softening of tension. The night is long, but gentle. You are safe now, wrapped in stillness, drifting on the rhythm of waves and whispers. Close your eyes, let the hum settle, and carry with you the quiet truth. Even the fiercest warriors paused to comb their beards before the storm. And so, you can rest too.